Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Could everyone take a seat, please? Good morning. Thank you so much for coming despite this wonderful December weather here in Washington, D.C. Cold rain, it's always nice. But welcome to the Gallup Great Hall. And I want to just start out by thanking the chairman and CEO of Gallup, Jim Clifton, who actually is truly our host here, because this is the global headquarters of the Gallup organization, which is a wonderful information and polling company based here in DC, but completely global. And you'll see lots of data around the walls. My name is Justin Smith, and I'm the founder and CEO of a new global news company called Semaphore. And I'm really thrilled to be with you today alongside the Atlantic Council and Ambassador Ramayad during such a momentous week here in DC. It's just been remarkable. I think all of us are exhausted after the last 5 days, but it's been very energizing, so much buzz and excitement and so many conversations and new friends and new ideas. We at Semaphore have been hosting a number of activities this week in this room, including our inaugural Africa Summit, which we did on Monday. Maybe some of you were there, as well as a conversation we did yesterday with the Rwandan President Paul Kagame. Anyway, just a quick word on Semaphore, because I see this is an audience of folks interested in African news, I presume. We are a brand new global independent news startup. But we're special, I think, because many of us who started it actually came from running some of the biggest news companies in the world. I used to run Bloomberg, the global news company. I was a CEO there for 10 years until I quit my big corporate job to come and work in my kitchen. But really with a purpose to build a new, fresh, modern news organization. And what's interesting, one of the key ideas behind Semaphore is that there's no modern global news company that really understands the world, that doesn't present news through a Western lens or an American lens or European lens or, for that matter, an Asian lens, but rather looks at the world through a global, almost a planetary lens. And so we started Semaphore with 2 editions, a US edition, but we're very proud that we also started with a sub-Saharan African news edition. And in fact, across the last couple of months, we've hired some of what we think are the greatest journalists covering Africa. Yinka Adegoke, who is a Nigerian, but who's done wonderful work at Reuters and other places. Alex Akwajiram, who we hired from the FT, a Ghanaian, amazing journalist. And we're actually putting bureau chiefs in Lagos, in Nairobi, in Johannesburg. We're adding 10 other journalists across the continent. So we'll have about 15 journalists covering Africa within the next 3 months, which makes it about 13 more journalists than the New York Times, the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, which, for a startup, it's good to be able to say, we're much bigger than you guys. What are you talking about? So anyway, we hope you'll sign up for our newsletter. It's a wonderful Semaphore Africa. It comes out 3 times a week. It's going to come out once a day soon. SEMAFOR. Yeah, here, SEMF. Thank you, though. There are no dumb questions. That everyone probably was wondering that same thing. So, anyway, semaphore.com, and if you go and you can sign up for some of our newsletters, the Africa newsletter, the Washington newsletter, the global newsletter. I think you'll find it really fresh, intelligent, independent content that is not controlled by any corporate interest, but is controlled by people who care about independent news media. You should have seen our interview with President Kagame yesterday. We asked him some really tough questions, and I don't think he was very used to it, but that's what we do at Semaphore. Anyway, I've spoken too long. We are so happy to be working with the Atlantic Council, and especially for this conversation about the creative industries today and the artwork outside and all these discussions. So let me, with that, welcome you again, thank Gallup, thank all of you, and hand it back over to Aubrey Ruby, who is the Senior Fellow at the Africa Center at Atlantic Council. Thank you for coming.
Everyone here?
Thank you, and good morning, everyone.
today. It's my honor and pleasure to be the MC of our program today and to ensure that we're having a lively and fun conversation, especially when so many of you have sat through very, very boring speeches this week. So it's really a pleasure. And just to show how we think about things differently at the Atlantic Council, at the Africa Center, we did really want to make sure that we started this program on creative industries by highlighting creative industries. And so you might have seen in the breakfast area the incredible artworks, the images of the artworks, and some fashion pieces. And we're about to hear from two amazing women who are going to speak a little bit about both things so you can understand how it kind of fits into the program. I've been a senior fellow at the Africa Center for over 8 years now, and we've been proud to lead on the creative industries. We wrote a report on the creative industries and the power of the creative industries to drive economic development back in 2018. But I wrote a book about, in part, the African creative industries that came out in 2015. So we've long been champions, and under the leadership of Ambassador Ramayad, we've taken it to a new level. So really, it's our pleasure today. So first, I would love to introduce Nina Jamson, who is the founder of Koshi O. These are the beautiful pieces of fashion you have seen out in the lobby. And if you're interested in more of it, I recommend you talk to her. She is not only a champion and passion for a retelling of the kind of African narrative and highlighting the beauty from the continent, but also is here in DC. So please, Nina.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. First of all, I would like to thank Atlantic Council and Impact Fund for African Creatives and all who have made it possible for us to gather here today. My name is Nina Jamson, and I'm the designer of Koshio, an African-inspired brand based here in DC. I was born and raised in Ghana, West Africa. I'm used to saying that because people confuse it here as Guyana. I attended college here in the States, and I quickly noticed the different stereotypes of how Africa as a continent was viewed. For me, I felt perplexed by this because my father was a successful engineer and my mother was a well-known fashion designer of her time. I grew up in a middle to upper class family, and it disturbed me that people thought I had flies all over me and spent my time climbing mango trees. On second thought, I did climb some mango trees, but I wasn't starring in the Jungle Book. From that moment, I had this inner desire to let people know the other side of Africa, because contrary to what the world thinks, Africa is rich and a beautiful continent. The best way I could maneuver to do this was through fashion, by watching my mother. Someone might ask, why fashion? The thing is, we sell fantasies and stories through fashion. Let me use a real-life example, like Ralph Lauren. He was a poor immigrant kid from Europe who lived in the Bronx. Those of you who have been to the Bronx know. He would go to the movies as a child, which was a form of escapism. Years later, before he decided to start a clothing brand, a friend took him to a polo match, and there he was exposed to wealth and how rich people lived. This moment inspired Polo by Ralph Lauren clothing. It was bigger than just sewing clothes. He made sure his vision was shown throughout his brand. He created some kind of fantasy. And when people wear that polo sign, they feel like they are in some type of exclusive club. All of a sudden, we were buying into an idea. To go back to my point, fashion has the ability to change how people would view our entire continent as a whole. We in the creative space can be a force to help change the narrative through images and videos, exposing a side of the continent the world must finally see. We haven't done a good job revealing to the rest of the world. When you support a creative, remember the big picture we have just discussed this meeting. Koshio brand was started in the year 2010. In the beginning, we were trying to discover our niche and started with shirts for women. We did have success with that, but then we quickly realized our items were pulling men into the two local female boutiques we were stocking at. That's when I realized there was actually potential in menswear because there was no quality men's sports shirts that were African-inspired, competing with top-tier brands like Hugo Boss, Ted Baker, Hackett, and everything in between. And this was our opportunity. I set out to source the best fabrics and craftsmanships we could find. But there was a bigger hurdle ahead of us because quality was just not enough. How do we express that our product is premium with the word African attached to it, when for decades poverty has been used to describe us? They view our clothing just like how they view our continent. Don't get me wrong, I do not blame the West on how they see us. We have done very poorly on branding ourselves. One of the hardest things is once the gatekeepers of the industry see me as a black woman, African in the stands, they automatically assume that my products are inferior. But is this not ironic that almost every brand brags about using Egyptian cotton? The last I checked, Egypt is in Africa. It was here I termed the word African luxury. I have this is a little side note, I have a very successful friend in the industry. And when we are having a meeting with a buyer or someone of importance, he always introduces me by my husband's profession. Her husband is a top cardiologist, you know. And even though I have never discussed it with him, I understand what he is doing. He doesn't want them to look down on me or my brand, which is sad, but it's the reality on the ground. Despite all the hurdles, I'm proud with what we have achieved as a brand thus far. When we go to trade shows, we are put next to established brands like Robert Graham and Eaton. This is a big deal because it shows that the hard work that we put in our quality and imagery cannot be denied. We are now in 30+ stores and still growing. This is a milestone because we are the first in pushing African luxury men's sports shirts, and we have started to get recognition for it. Do you know that in most major retail stores, you will find out that less than 1% of products on the shelves are Black-owned? As much as it's been challenging, it's also what makes me unique. There has been a lot of progress, I must say. Over the past 10 years, people have become more receptive to anything African. After what happened to George Floyd, retail spaces have recognized they have to do better and have pledged, including Nordstrom, to have at least 15% of retail space dedicated to Black-owned brands next year. Koshio is not only working towards changing the narrative, but we have managed to promote artists and artisans on the continent. We are working towards one day being able to help fund other creatives like myself in the diaspora and on the continent. The other day, I heard an interview between Davido and Trevor, both children of the continent. In an interview, and Davido was thanking the Africans in the diaspora because we were the ones who made Afrobeats mainstream. We played their music for a whole decade at our little gatherings and parties, which started to influence our American friends, and now Afrobeats is constantly #1 on the radio stations. Just like how music has gone mainstream, the time for fashion has also arrived. I will urge people in this room to patronize African and Black-owned brands because most of these brands are self-funded and every penny goes a long way. When you support a creative, you are helping to push the new narrative of the real truth about Africa. Hashtag Africa's time has come.
Thank you so much, Nina. And please, those of you who are interested, talk to her immediately about her work. And now I'd love to invite Rama Diallo Njai to the stage. And she will speak a little bit about the Great Green Wall Foundation and some of the art that is coming up here. And so, Rama, please come up here. And thank you, Nina. Thank you. Here you are. Would you like to take a seat, or do you want to speak from the podium? Okay, yes, I know we're sitting here. Okay.
Well, before the formal greetings, please allow me to say that, my dear sister, I will be proud to buy the first piece of your brand here.
Oh, look at this.
And wear it as soon as tomorrow. Excellencies, partners, and esteemed guests, good morning. It's a great pleasure to be here this morning, and I would like to start my remark with some background. Over the years, Africa, particularly the Sahel, has experienced a great deal of devastation, economically, politically, security-wise, and most importantly, ecologically, through climate change. The devastation that the climate change has caused to the ecosystem of the Sahel threatens the landscape of the rest of Africa. Many great initiatives have been rolled out by organizations in Africa and outside of Africa to combat these devastations, some of which are the Great Green Wall, which combats deforestation, and AFR 100, which combats land degradation. The Great Green Wall was approved and launched by the African Union in 2007. Today, 15 years after, only 15% of the plan is underway. Many of these initiatives were launched with the right intention and plan. However, the common issues with initiatives like this in Africa, despite the efforts, is that they either stall for much longer time than planned, or they end prematurely. In our research, we discovered that the main reason is that these projects, as innovative and groundbreaking as they are, lack visibility to grassroots people and the local communities. We interviewed many local people in different countries in the Sahel, and they knew nothing about the Great Green Wall Initiative. To be quite honest, this is disturbing. And I will not be surprised that some of us, or even many of us in this room, may not know about this initiative. When I launched GGWA Foundation, it was for this reason, and to educate the communities about the importance of climate initiatives in their communities that can bring huge economic advantage, and also to help drive the initiatives to realize their desired results through communities' participation and inclusion. The big question was, how do we bring people of different ethnicities, religions, beliefs, and priorities together for this common cause? Well, ladies and gentlemen, the answer to me was culture. And being a minister of culture for many years, it was a perfect fit for me. At the welcome dinner on Monday, when President Obasanjo introduced the foundation, he launched our Project Imagine, which is aimed at using culture to create awareness of the Great Green Wall and help to mobilize local grant efforts to the initiative. At the end of his speech, he called on the world leaders to embrace and support the efforts of the foundation. As part of the Imagine project, we just completed a residency of artists with artists from different parts of Africa gathering at the prestigious University of Mohammed VI in Benghazi in Morocco to produce over 50 artworks, special and unique artworks, for fundraising to support the effort of the foundation. These artists volunteered their time, their talent to show their commitment to being the first to invest in resolving the problems of Africa. It is invigorating to see that this time Africans have taken the lead in solving Africa's problems. Today, some of the images of the artworks are in this room, and the rest are posted on GGWA website. The plan is to donate this unique art piece to individuals and organizations that support the foundation's effort, like the CEO of the bank. I would like to challenge the audience today in this room to take the same stance as our heroic artists to become the first world leaders to invest in GGWA's effort toward the Great Green Wall by providing generous financial support to the foundation for the realization of the initiative by the 2030 plan target. The devastation combated by the Great Green Wall initiative has caused deep and multi-dimensional crisis in Africa, and not acting now will only deepen its impact on the continent. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hereby urge you to act. And I am confident that we will use the occasion of this summit to have a renewed focus and commitment to take action to transform together millions of lives. And by the way, to support the foundation, there is a GGWA artwork flyer on your seat for more information. So, dear Justin, I heard you. You have content for your next newsletter. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And really, it's your tireless campaigning while you were minister and now as the executive director. I saw many pieces of art, particularly at the dinner last Monday, that I'm interested in, so I will be looking at the flyer indeed. And so it's really my pleasure now to welcome to the stage a champion for Africa. She was a tireless traveler and a voice. Routinely, I saw her mostly on Twitter, and I don't think many people travel as much as I do across the region, and I think Akuna outdid us all while she was at State Department. So she was our Deputy Assistant Secretary for African Affairs at State, and she has departed that role for almost a bigger vision, which she is now the CEO of Next Narrative Africa, and she will tell us all about that. And she's going to have a wonderful conversation with the Honorable Nandi Nditwa from Namibia, the Deputy Prime Minister. So please, Akuna, welcome to stage.
All right. Good morning, and welcome to all of you who have braved Washington wintry mix, as we like to call this, to be here today. And I know you've done it because you see the potential of Africa's creative industries. Shortly after I left government, early September, I had the pleasure of having lunch with Ambassador Ramayad, and it was the first time that she mentioned that she wanted to do an event focused on the creative industries. And I said, well, if we're gonna do it, we need to focus on the business and investing side of the creative industries. And so I am so grateful to her and the council, and particularly Tyrell on the team who has worked so tirelessly to organize this, and of course, Aubrey Ruby, our MC. I've got to thank a couple of folks, of course, Ramayad for her vision, but also my team at Next Narrative Africa, including my co-founder, Emmanuel Mutduma, who's in the audience, and Roberta Annan and the Impact Fund for African Creatives, which supported the fashion exhibition that we have here today, and also supported the designer who designed this dress that I'm wearing today. When I was serving in the Biden administration as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Africa, I focused quite a bit on the creative industries, and there were several strategic reasons why I was doing that. Africa's music, TV, film, fashion, art, sports, and gaming industries are the continent's future. We know that Africa is the youngest continent on the planet and is experiencing a demographic boom. Turns out that the creative industries are a significant source of employment. Young people want to be in that space, and they are able to be trained in skills that are transferable to other industries, including technology and digital technologies. It's estimated that the creative industries can create more than 3 million jobs over the next 6 years with adequate investment and support. TV and film production alone, which is the business that I've gone into, could create 20 million jobs and be a $20 billion per year industry. The creative industries are also key to narrative change. They are the sources of the images and representations that we see in the media that inform the way that we as Africans see ourselves and see our continent. And by carefully and intentionally changing those images, we will not only create jobs and opportunity on the continent, but we will draw investment from outside the continent, from people who see Africa in its true light. Lastly, the creative industries are a potential and a natural place for there to be collaboration within the global Black diaspora. It's already happening. We see it in music. We know it's going to be happening increasingly in television and film. And so it is a place that the United States has a competitive advantage. And that's why we thought to center this event around investment, because it is clear that it is an economic driver. And in order to do that, we need champions among our African leaders. And that is why I am so delighted to have one today. As Aubrey mentioned, when I was at the State Department, I traveled quite a bit. My very first unofficial virtual visit was to Namibia. And I had the pleasure then to meet the Honorable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of International Affairs and Cooperation, who is here with us today. The Honorable Deputy Prime Minister Nandi Ndaitwah, I'd like to invite you to join us on the stage as I familiarize our audience with some of your fantastic initiatives on behalf of Namibia and the creative industries. Thank you. Please, thank you. Please, ma'am. Please take a seat. Okay. The Honorable Deputy Prime Minister has served as Namibia's Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for International Relations and Cooperation since 2015. And she has just won her re-election campaign and will be serving in that role for at least another 2 years. Her political career began in 1966 when she joined SWAPO. She left Namibia for exile in 1974 and served in various roles within SWAPO while in exile. When she returned to Namibia in 1989, she returned as Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs. She is a former Minister of Women's Affairs and Child Welfare, former Minister of Information and Broadcasting, and former Minister of Environment and Tourism. She has been a member of Parliament of the Republic of Namibia since 1990 and is also a member of SWAPO's party Political Bureau, the Central Committee, and Secretary for Foreign Relations of the party. Last but not least, she is a member of the Executive Committee and Central Committee of the SWAPO Party Women's Council. The Deputy Prime Minister is a fierce advocate for women's leadership in Namibia and across the continent. She's an avid reader, a champion of the creative industries, and I'm proud to say, a friend. Madam Deputy Prime Minister, as Namibia's top diplomat, you have been a vocal advocate for boosting trade and investment into Namibia, including into the creative industries. This is a sector that's sometimes dismissed as not being very serious. So why have you prioritized investment into creative industries, and how is Namibia doing this?
Thank you very much, Akuna, and thank you for making it possible for me to participate in this very important event today. Coming specific to your question as to why I feel it's necessary for us to pay attention to creative industry. First, as an African, creative industry is what makes us to discover and to realize who we are. It's an industry where we express ourselves. It's an industry which gives us the courage. It's an industry that helps us to be focused and to move forward. It has a different dimension of it, and we use it in so many ways. I can give you a classic example that in Africa, whatever you do basically, when you are doing it, whether you do it individually, you are doing it communally, the sector of music comes in very handy. When you are busy in the field as a group, you are cultivating, you are singing. When you are ponding your mahangu or anything, you are singing. And I'm telling you that as a child of the liberation struggle, during that time, we have to compose a lot of the revolutionary songs, because that's what also gives us the power in order to move forward. And it has brought Africa where Africa is by liberating our continent. This industry is also an economic and social industry. It's an economic and social industry because it has a potential not just to bring our people closer to one another, not only make it possible for Africa to have a role to play internationally, but it's an industry that is a job creator. And it really makes one to be positive in life. So when you are in a creative industry, you cannot be depressed. You are basically, every time you are opening up. And that's why it's a creative. When your mind is creative, whether you are creative with your mouth, whether with your hand, everything starts in your mind. And that's why in Africa, really, we have to go back and realize the importance of our creative industry. Because it's unfortunate sometimes when people see the artists, when people see the fashion designers, when people see the musician, sometimes we do not realize how much they are impacting in all of us and the contribution they are making in our economy. One of my teachers of art, who unfortunately has passed on, was like an abstract art. And when he was there in his room painting, we find it very difficult to understand. But as I move forward, I realized what was in. So that's why it's important that we invest in the creative art. You mentioned at the beginning that I have just won my position back as the vice president. It was really involving a lot of campaign. And I'm telling you, the role players in creative art, I mean creative industry, they came to me. They were part of that campaign. And they have given me a task that I should really try to put more energy and more focus on the role the creative industry can play. And I believe it can really assist us in addressing the unemployment, particularly among our youth in Namibia.
Fantastic. I remember when I was in Namibia visiting that you mentioned how important the television and film industry was, and you talked about how Mad Max was filmed in Namibia, and obviously looking at the fantastic landscape and the beauty of Namibia, it makes sense that there would be a lot of international productions coming. Can you speak a little bit about how Namibia is promoting investment into the television and film industries and into the creative industries in general? I know that the Honorable Minister for Youth and Sports is here, so sports is also a part of the focus. But just to give our audience a sense of the kinds of ways that the Namibian government is promoting investment into the sector.
You see, investment promotion is very high in government agenda in all sectors of our economy. Now, when it comes to creative industry, Namibia is part and parcel of the international community. And we belong to different international organizations, including WIPO. And whoever will be investing in Namibia in the creative industry, in addition to our own laws, is also protected by the international law with specific reference to WIPO, to which we are members. And we are encouraging it in a way that we would want to look into it in all its dimensions. The film industry you have mentioned, I must say that we really to do a serious work in order to elevate the level of our participants in this sector in developing our film industry. When you were talking about where I come from, I was also once a Minister of Information and Broadcasting. And the film industry falls under this ministry. One thing when I try to make myself understand, I realized that we were not doing much. And I took a decision to myself to say, before I leave the Ministry for Information, I wanted to see Namibia having her own soapy because our TVs was just having soapies from other countries. And there was one artist who came in from Spain, and they had a soapy which was so popular, which was in English. And when I had dinner with this, she did not even know good morning. And then I said, what is this? I said, we must have ours. And I have to tell the Film Commission that we need that. And I think Namibian will remember a soapy which was called The Tie That Bound. So I have to make that. Similarly, I went to Egypt, and I visited different sites. And when I looked at the features of Egypt and I looked at the terrain of Namibia, I felt that Namibia can really be a site for film making, not only for Namibians, not only for Southern Africa, not only for Africa, but internationally. And I'm still holding that idea that talking now on investing in the creative industry and the film industry, we are still looking at whoever might really think of investing in the film industry in Namibia, and we will make space available even to put up a film city where the international filmmakers they can come to Namibia and shoot their films, because we have very beautiful sites. So that is another thing, that when we talk about investing in the film industry, and in so doing, it will bring in other sectors of the creative industry. Because there you are now, you have your costume designers, you have to have your makeup makers, you have to have the internal decorators who have to come in when the film is being played, and then the right people to put the right music that has to go with your film. So when you have that, you are very comprehensive, and then you are then encouraging also our sports people, because some of the films might be sport related, and you need all these people to come in when they are needed. So there's really a lot of room for one to invest in creative industry in Namibia, and we are welcoming them to come as part of us really trying to bring up this untapped industry, and there is a potential.
Yes, that's tremendous. You've mentioned protecting intellectual property rights through your membership in WIPO, and of course all of the opportunities in developing the industries, including a film city. And I hope that all of the investors and bankers in the audience heard the Deputy Prime Minister say that Namibia is open for business. I hope that we can make that happen. I did want to allow for at least one or two questions from the audience, if possible, for the Deputy Prime Minister. Are there any questions in the audience?
Do right together. Make it easier for us. Please, we'll take both.
Hello, how are you? My name is Khame Banti. I'm a filmmaker from Botswana, so very happy to see my neighbor from Namibia. We've been very, very envious from across the border, watching all the things that you've achieved. You mentioned, for instance, Mad Max as a location, and we understand how instrumental entities like the Film Commission have been in bringing all of that together. We're only just setting up our Arts Council now. What would your advice be in terms of to officials, to our leaders, in terms of getting the structure to work the way it's supposed to, so that it's not just another body that essentially is populated but is not doing what it's supposed to? Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Garrett Webster. I'm a Jamaican American. I live in South Africa. I had the pleasure of going to Namibia earlier this year for the tourism, Youth and Tourism Expo. As far as the film and creative industries, my business, Africa Accessible, we do strategic partnerships between Atlanta, the state of Georgia, and different places in Africa around creative industries, tourism, and economic development. Are you benchmarking cities and industries on the US side that have succeeded, particularly in the African American community, in the areas that you're looking to succeed in? And how are you engaging those areas to better further Namibia as far as the learnings and development?
Thank you very much, my neighbor. And I'm really happy to see a person closer home also having an interest and a role player in this industry. And coming specific to your question, one thing, the creative industry, I can compare it with the agriculture sector. You know, the agriculture sector is a sector where there is no competition. Basically, you need one another. You find farmers, they sit around the fire and they are discussing their farming technique because you know that food will be needed. No one can push the other one out of the market. And that is exactly the same with the creative industry, to my understanding. Because everything you are bringing on the table is unique on itself. And what they do, they complement one another. So therefore, as for your question, we just need to be creating the necessary forums where we'll be able to exchange information and then to learn from one another. In fact, as a Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, I always say within our discussion in SADC that is one sector we have been neglecting. And we really need to seriously look into the creative industry in as far as SADC is concerned. Because once we do that as a SADC, it will go a long way to enable us to address many of the challenges that we are having, particularly among our youth. In Namibia and Botswana, look at our population. We can't do it on our own. We have to do it as a region. We have to do it as a continent. And that will enable us to move stronger internationally. So that is really what we need to do. And then to the second question is about benchmarking. I have to tell you that when we talk about the creative industry, we are also linking it to the tourism sector. Because here you have the cultural tourism that is to come in. And looking at other countries, you mentioned United States, definitely with the diaspora, that is where we have now to link up. You remember now the diaspora is the fifth region of Africa. And this fifth region of Africa, we need to engage it in totality. So we cannot only try to engage the fifth region of Africa when it comes to other sectors of our economy. For example, during this summit, people were talking about investment, but very little is said about investment in the creative industry. So we need now to understand the diaspora, how do they get into the creative industry, and how we can bring it to be part of the continent. So that, because as I mentioned earlier, creative industry is not restricted. So you must be global because we all share what is happening in the creative industry. So benchmarking is very important, and these are the programs when you see how we are engaging our young people. Some of them are sent out to participate in international festival. So during that time when they are participating in international festival, they are benchmarking with others, and they come back home with new ideas as how we can really sell ourselves. Another thing is art. Art is another area we are seeing here, how you can tell your story. You know, they say that your piece of art tells a long story than when you are talking with your mouth. Because people can give different answers to different pieces that you are finding if you come closer to that artwork. I'm already seeing the dunes somewhere there. You see, yeah, I'm seeing the Namibian dunes. I can call them Namibian dunes. I'm already seeing, so it's a lot of things that you can see, and it brings you closer to one another. And then that's where ownership and belonging comes in. And when you belong, definitely you'll be able to, you will be able to have your mind opened and able to do so many things for yourself and for others.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, but I thought I would just briefly ask the Deputy Prime Minister to offer her concluding thoughts on where we go from here and what you think are the next steps for Namibia and the rest of Africa and other leaders in terms of promoting the creative industries.
Thank you very much. Where we are going from here, I want to inform you that creative industry will be one of our priority area as we move forward. One thing, Namibia, we have high unemployment, particularly among our youth. And UNESCO has issued information that particularly in Africa, the creative industry is able to create 20 million jobs. And we feel as Namibia, we have to have a share out of these 20 million jobs. And of course, share it with all the African countries. The unemployment in Namibia of the youth is not only in Namibia, but African youth, they are all facing the same. We say we cannot continue to allow our young people risking their lives on the high seas, in fact, following their jobs. Because when we take our raw material outside the continent unprocessed, we are literally exporting the job of the African young people. And we cannot blame them when they are following their jobs. So the only thing we can do is to make sure that their jobs remain in the continent and they can only live because of a choice. So going forward, Akuna, is that the creative industry has to be brought up to par with other industries. And we are inviting those who are interested in investing in Africa to seriously also look in investing in the creative industry in its totality. Be it the music industry, be it is the art and culture, be it the film industry. In that way, we will be to be very inclusive in terms of our developmental agenda and to make sure that nobody is left out, if I have to borrow the word of my president, Dr. Hage Geingob. So that's what we are doing. And as you have mentioned, that I have won my vice presidency, which makes me to become 2024 my party's presidential candidate, going through, we would like to say the creative art being really the mainstream of our economic development, in addition to other sectors that we already know, like energy, which is very important, agriculture, mining, and others. They have to be brought together. So thank you very much, Akuna, for this opportunity. I invite you to Namibia. Please come and
Ladies
invest
and gentlemen,
in
Deputy
the
Prime
creative
Minister
industry.
Nandi Ndaitwah.
Future president.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And now we will have Mr. Melvin Foote, the President and CEO of the Constituency for Africa, who has for 40 years been leading our work as an African global diaspora here in the United States, and he will introduce our keynote speaker. Mel, please.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. You guys are still sleeping. Yeah. My name is Melvin Foote. I'm the president of the Constituency for Africa, and we are basically an African-American lobby for Africa. One of my claims to fame is I'm the one who gave the idea to President Obama for the Young African Leaders Initiative, YALI. Yeah. So you all owe me, okay? I got a good job here. I'm to introduce Rita Jo Lewis, who is the keynote speaker for this morning. Rita Jo Lewis is an American attorney. She's a former diplomat and politician who is the president and chair of the U.S. Export-Import Bank of the United States. Rita was confirmed by the U.S. Senate in February of this year, and she's the first black and person of color to head up Exim Bank in 88 years. She's the first. So perhaps her biggest claim to fame is she's my good friend. So without further ado, let me call on Rita Jo Lewis to give us her remarks. Rita. Yay! guys supposed to stand up. You guys should stand up and welcome her. Stand up. She's walking history. Walking history. Yeah.
Yeah, y'all know Mel. Yes, I think we are all making history. I think we're totally making history in this summit. You know, when I look out in the room, I was, you know, as they start to prepare your program for ALS, and I saw Mel's name as the person who was instrumental in this session, along with the ambassador and Semaphore and others. I was really pleased. Mel and I have been in the battle a long time. And when I first actually had my foray, we won't talk about how long it is, but you know, he has the gray hair, but you know, that's neither here nor there. But Mel probably knows more about this than most folks in Washington, and has just been such a steadfast friend and supporter of the continent, and introduced so many of us to the leaders and the people in this room than I think anyone. I am so excited to be here today. So, Your Excellencies, honorable ministers, members of the Diplomatic Corps, and distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to take a moment also to express my appreciation to the ambassador. Where's the ambassador? Ambassador Yard of the Atlantic Council, for inviting me to speak at this very important event. And also, as I look around the room, I see my co-financing partners, President Obama. I could not be more pleased to see you also in this audience. And then I see my sister. She's sitting on the front row, shaking her head, from the Africa Finance Investment Forum. I'm telling you, they keep reminding me, right? But they don't really have to remind me too far, because I went to Africa recently, and that was my first stop. And so when I know that I think I'm in the right place when I see my friends and my colleagues. I also see the head of the Bank of Industry here. And so it's just many, many people that I met long before we signed our MOUs. As I tell someone, no one had to introduce me to Africa. No one had to introduce me to our funding partners, because I had already met with them over and over as we prepared for the agreements that we signed this week. So as president and chair of Exim Bank, it's really an honor and a privilege to be part of President Biden's U.S. Africa Leaders Summit alongside so many of my colleagues from the Biden-Harris administration. You know, in the last 3 days, we have seen an unprecedented manifestation of the strong bond between America and Africa. And certainly, the creative industry is at the heart of the shared history and cultural heritage. You know, it's very clear for us that America fully recognizes the richness and diversity of African cultures, and we're keen to partner with all of you to advance the goals of a more prosperous African continent. So today, many of you have already heard that the spotlight is going to be on the Africa Leaders Summit with the leaders and President Biden and Vice President Harris in their session with the leaders on partnering on Agenda 2063, which we know is the AU's agenda about how a more prosperous Africa can be really put at the forefront of every conversation that is happening with U.S. leaders. You know, in the spirit of that, we are fully supportive of the goals and aspirations of the African Union's Agenda for 2063 for shared prosperity and well-being, for unity and integration, for a continent of free citizens and expanded horizons, where the full potential of women and youth are realized, and with freedom from fear, disease, and want. I can tell you that in any meeting that I've ever had with leaders and ministers who are coming to XM to talk about the work that we can do together, the full advancement of women, the full advancement of young professionals, and the full advancement of the young men and women is all, and especially around entrepreneurship, is the constant conversation that we discuss when we're talking, especially when we're talking about the support that an organization like XM Bank can have about financing in Africa. So we believe that it is right that the African Union, as part of Agenda 2063, has embraced the African rich culture and heritage to ensure the creative arts are major contributors to Africa's growth and transformation, especially in areas around infrastructure. You know, back in 2021 at the AU Summit, President Biden said, not only do we believe in the nations of Africa in the continent-wide spirit of entrepreneurship and innovation, but also as we look about the challenges and opportunities ahead, which may be great, there is no doubt that our nations, our people, and the AU, that we're all up to the task. So an important task for us here is investing in Africa creative industry, and it's a worthy task, we believe, to undertake so to become a part of the realization of Agenda 2063. You know, as we look around and learn more about Africa's creative industry in music, film, art, fashion, and so on, it's often ignored for the opportunities it can create and the role it can play in the continent's economy. So, you know, I just met one of the leading actresses here, and I met one of the leading businessmen who's also in the music industry, and I was letting them know that Afrobeat was definitely on my playlist. That if, from a film perspective, I watch Netflix all the time, so I got my list. I think she's going to send me some more about what I should be watching, especially the ones that she was producing in the Nigerian frame. But all of you know that when you have a continent that has the medium age of 18 years, that the creative industry can employ the largest number of youth between the ages of 15 and 30 when you look at the African continental youth divide. So this is a sector that no one can ignore. You know, we only need to look at the Nigerian film industry, known as Nollywood. As I said, I'm an avid watcher. I was actually naming some films. I think she was a little surprised. But I was naming my shows I was watching, but we won't talk about that here. But it's the numbers that I'm sure you've been discussing is that it produces about 50 movies per week and generating an impressive 590 million annually and employs thousands of people. So all of this is at the intersection and convergence of creativity where jobs are being created. So when I'm talking with the leadership in the African Union, it's not about how we can, as XM Bank, being the only official America export credit agency that is over 88 years old, that it is an industry, it is a institution that is independently mandated by Congress, and it is an industry, it is an institution that has over $135 billion authorization. We have about 400 staff and about $120 million administrative budget. And so with that, we're very pleased that our agency is 100% paying attention to this sector because it goes to the heart of economic growth through various initiatives. So given that a digital transformation is underway in Africa, yesterday you may have heard that President Biden launched the Digital Transformation for Africa initiative to foster the growth of a healthy, inclusive, and resilient digital ecosystem in Africa. So I'm pleased to tell you that XM, US XM, is one of the 18 US departments and agencies participating in the initiative. You know, in finding ways for all types of stakeholders to collaborate in mobilizing capital, partnerships are very critical to raise awareness of the creative sector for greater and more successful impact. You know, it's great to see that US streaming players like Netflix in 2016 and Amazon Prime Video in 2021 have launched on the continent and are influencing both the conception and production of African content through partnerships with local producers such as Ebony, Life, and Inkblot. And of course, everyone knows Beyonce's critically acclaimed Black is King album that featured prominent artists from Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa, and Tanzania. So, attracting and facilitating more investment in the creative industry and partnerships across industries, international financial institutions, and strategic investors are fundamental, I believe, and we believe, to the sector's growth. So, for example, partnerships in investments toward establishing affordable and reliable internet connectivity would facilitate, we believe, sizable growth in music revenues and the industry at large. So the Digital Transformation for Africa Initiative and XM's China and Transformational Export programs, we believe, can help in this space. So let me just say a few more words of how we believe that XM can play a role. As an export credit agency, first off, XM Bank has a congressional mandate to do more in Africa, and we've made that a priority. In addition, with our first infrastructure transaction in Angola completed in Africa in 1942, XM has practically touched most countries and most sectors in Africa in the last 80 years. XM is one of the lead agencies implementing Prosper Africa, Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment, what we call the President's Key Initiative, PGII, and the U.S. strategy towards sub-Saharan Africa of the Biden-Harris administration. So we really have a two-prong. We have a congressional mandate, and we have a president and a vice president who has placed U.S.-Africa relations as a key component in our foreign policy strategy. And then, yesterday, XM signed over $1 billion of MOUs with African financial institutions during the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit to foster economic opportunity and support jobs throughout Africa in the United States. So when I sit here and I see my partners from Afri XM in the Africa, I always get it right, investment forum. You know, when you can make that your first stop on the continent, it just tells me that we were in the right place and in the right space, because that's where deals are happening. That's where the conversation, where individuals that I see in this room were there and participating. It really lets us know that we are stopping in the right place, because not only did we sign that agreement with Afri XM, but we also did with Africa 50 and also with the Africa Finance Corporation, and there's much more to go. So as president and chair of XM Bank, I think in many ways Africa is a perfect example of how our mission in financing U.S. exports is fully aligned with the economic goals and development of the continent. The resources and tools that we have specifically are our working capital for small business, our direct loans, our insurance products, and our guarantees that come with the full faith backing of the United States. And so when you see that, to us, it shows not only that we are continuing to be where we need. Now, as to, it seems like I'm coming in a full circle, because when I say that our first infrastructure transaction was in Angola, I literally, before coming here, just met with the Minister of Finance from Angola. And that was not my first time of meeting with the minister. I've seen her on numerous occasions. But yesterday, we were the president of Angola on Tuesday, the president of Mozambique, and then the 4 multilateral institutions participated with us at XM's first conference, where we had over 1,000 participants, that launched not only our conference, but it really was at the beginning of the Africa Leaders Summit. So we could not be better in one place, in one space. As I tell you, I keep saying, I'm not new to this game. The game for all of us is that how we can collaborate and work and partner together. That is the promise that I think we have made to each other. That collaborations and partnerships is going to be the key for moving forward, because I cannot come back to the investment forum and don't have anything to show for it. So, as she said, during the G20's most recent meeting, the president announced a deal we had just done in Angola for Gates Air, which was providing electricity throughout the region. And so to be able to see the minister and the president and to be able to talk to them specifically and directly about the award that XM had provided, about the transaction, the financing that we had done, you know, it really warms your heart. It just makes you know that you really are in the right place, and that, as they say, that everything is lining up the way we need for all of our good. So to this end, I'm also pleased, and so that's why in the transaction for Angola's radio signal expansion and studio modernization project, it's a project that's going to provide 95% of the Angolan population with FM radio signals, once complete, was in support of exports from Gates Air from Ohio to Radio Nacional de Angola. So with partnerships and collaborations, I can just tell you, that is where we are today. That's where we stand today. We stand firm. We stand strong. We understand that just what it says Africa time has come. Everyone has to be where they need to be. This is our moment. It is our moment for ourselves, but not just about the United States. This is a moment for both and all of our nations to be able to come together, to be able to make sure we get something done for the people and the citizens of which we all serve. It cannot be about individual choices. It has to be about the business of our young people. It has to be about the empowerment of women, because that's where the action is. All you have to do is look at, you know, being in this room, and I look around and I know they're members from the continent, but I also know that they're members here in the diaspora community. I'm sure you also, many of you may have participated in the diaspora meetings that have taken place. XM2 is very serious about the diaspora, as well as Africa on the continent in general, and that's another reason why XM has a statutory mandated advisory council on sub-Saharan Africa that just met fully again on Monday. We also named a senior advisor for Africa, who is also our acting head of global business development. He's here in the audience, Eric Ufo, who we're just so excited for being here. We spend a great deal of time in this arena. And it is also exciting that when I'm talking to other export credit agencies that can also provide financing tools and financing resources for the continent, as all of the investments that we're all talking about making or wanting to make, that so many ECAs, is what we call them, are talking to me about, and we have written in our agreements that we have re-upped during the Biden-Harris administration in the 9 months that I've been here, around co-financing on the continent together. Because one thing is clear, all eyes are on Africa. All eyes are on Africa and the relationship that they have with their nations. But I can tell you, from a U.S. government perspective, from a U.S. XM perspective, not only are our eyes on it, we intend to get something done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We're going on with the program, and it's amazing to follow such dynamic women. We have a future female president of Namibia, and an amazing chair of USXM and a champion for Africa. So thank you so much for your attention thus far. We have forthcoming an important discussion on the financing and business aspects of the creative industries. So please take your seats. We'll let our VVIPs exit the room. And for our virtual audience, really appreciate your attendance and tuning in from all over the continent. Shh. Thanks, everyone. All right. So listen, as Chair Lewis mentioned, President Biden yesterday announced a new Digital Africa program. And that really is bringing together specific sectors. One, of course, the creative industries, because the creative industries depends on mobile infrastructure in African markets. African youth are increasingly urban and increasingly connected, with over 600 million smartphones on the continent and incredible creator economy that's happening in this room and in front of our eyes and among our virtual audience. So the Atlantic Council's Africa Center, we are releasing a paper. Many of you have seen a forward copy of it about the importance of data and reducing the cost of data in African markets so that industries like the creative industries can really take off. So we are going to have a panel discussion of leading banks and investors in creative industries. I've seen Bank of Industry. I know AfriExim Bank is here, and large supporters of the industry. So with that, I want to invite Akuna Cook back to the stage as she is going to moderate this esteemed panel. Welcome, Akuna.
Okay, we have a rock star panel today, but I also understand that we have to be efficient with our time. So I'm going to hopefully quickly get everybody on stage, and I will introduce our panel one at a time. Okay, first we have Professor Benedict Orama, President and Chairman of the Board of Directors of the African Export-Import Bank, Professor Orama. We have Mr. Olukayode Patan, the Managing Director and CEO of the Bank of Industry in Nigeria. Veronica Chatterlane, the Senior Program Officer for Culture and Art Program and Open Society Foundations. And last but certainly not least, Audu Makori, the founder and Executive Vice Chairman of Chocolate City Group and co-founder of Pixel Ray Studios. Please sit down. I'll give a more fulsome background of exactly who we have here. We are so privileged to have such a fantastic panel to talk about investing and building Africa's creative industries. As I mentioned, Professor Orama chairs and is president of the AfriExim Bank. And to say that the bank has significantly and improved its global appeal and relevance under his leadership is a bit of an understatement. Professor Orama has been a tireless champion and pioneer in expanding the bank's role, including implementing the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. And just to be brief and to the point, what AfriExim Bank is doing with its Creative African Nexus program is revolutionary across the continent and really across the world. And so we were thrilled that Professor Orama could be here with us today to talk a bit about that. He is obviously, doesn't really need much of an introduction, but prolific writer, prolific intellect on the continent, regularly listed as one of the most influential Africans by several and many publications. But it is really the tremendous work that he is doing to revolutionize Afro-Exim Bank's work that we are excited to learn more today. So thank you, Professor Orama, for your support and for being here today. Mr. Olukayode Patan is the Managing Director and CEO of the Bank of Industry in Nigeria. It is Nigeria's oldest, largest, and arguably most successful development finance institution. He draws from significant experience gained across the financial sectors, including banking and capital markets. But it is really the Bank of Industry's pioneering work in supporting small and medium-sized enterprises in the creative industries that led us to say that we have to have Bank of Industry here today to talk more about how BOI is supporting this industry and how it can be a catalyst for similar investments across the continent. Veronica Chatelain is Brooklyn-born to immigrant parents. She is a heritage preservationist and grant maker working with artists, storytellers, and creatives who challenge the false narratives of communities in the global South. Woman after my own heart. As an advocate for Caribbean and African diasporic art, she collaborates with and supports activists from creative communities that question systemic racism and distorted histories through critical engagement and collaborative initiatives. Ultimately, her goal is for her work to drive institutional transformation that will radically support equity among Black and traditional spaces. She is currently the Senior Program Officer for Culture and Art at Open Society Foundations and a supporter of the Atlantic Council and of this event. Thank you, Veronica, for being here. Mr. Samba Matali is a Mali-born global African entrepreneur and pioneer in sustainable clean energy and solar solutions. He is the founder of Africa Development Solutions, as well as the co-founder and CEO of Selectra, the company driving the ACON Lighting Africa initiative. Recognized widely as one of the influential leaders driving growth in Africa, Samba is one of the key enablers setting up sustainable development ventures. With a global network and acute business acumen, he is particularly strong in establishing strategic and innovative financial structuring. And that has led to partnerships and growth models between private and public entities, as well as local and international financing institutions and banks. But Samba is particularly vocal in his support for the creative industries and for his thought that Africans need to change our software, our thinking about ourselves and the creative industries to drive growth. And I'm particularly interested in his thoughts on how digital transformation, given his work on data centers and in digital infrastructure, will continue to drive the creative industries. And last but not least, Audu Maikori is a multi-award-winning media entrepreneur, entertainment lawyer, social activist, and public speaker. He is the founder and executive vice chairman of Chocolate City Group, a company widely regarded as one of the most successful and influential entertainment companies in Africa. Chocolate City Group is comprised of Chocolate City Media, Chocolate City Kenya, CCX, and Chocolate City Music, one of the most successful record labels in Africa, responsible for the careers of some of Africa's biggest artists, including multiple Grammy-nominated Femi Kuti, CK, Emma Abaga, Black Bones, and Young John, among others. He's also the founder and CEO of Pixel Ray Studios, a Pan-African film studio and soundstage initiative focused on establishing and expanding the creative industry and its job markets across Africa and the Caribbean. In 2022, Pixel Ray signed an MOU with the National Film Authority of Ghana to establish 10 sound stages in Ghana to position it as a predominant film and production hub in West Africa. Thank you all for joining us today. So I just want to set the stage for this panel, and I'm going to try not to rush through it, although I know we are pressed for time, but I really want to take advantage of the tremendous resource and expertise we have on this stage. And so I'll just start by asking each of you to tell us a bit about how you and your organization are supporting the creative industries, why you have decided to make investments into the industry, and what your short and medium-term plans are for continuing and expanding your work. And then I'll follow up with a question before turning it for audience questions. And so, Professor Orama, I just wanted to start with you. As I mentioned, what Afrexim Bank is doing in terms of supporting the creative industries is really transformational. And so could you just tell us how you decided to pursue this line of work, a little bit about CanX, and what we can expect to see next?
Thank you very much. And let me also take the opportunity to thank the Atlantic Council for putting this panel together and for all the engagements they've organized as part of this US-Africa Leaders Summit. For us at Afrexim Bank, I think the issue of supporting the creative industry was a no-brainer. You know, the governments did nothing, and the industry just grew on its own. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened to the continent if the creative industry was fettered by all the kind of constraints the governments normally put on some of the businesses we do on the continent. It grew unnoticed, employed millions of youth, and all of a sudden became a global phenomenon in many of the countries. So for us, the work we do is support trade in goods and services. And we know very well that in a continent where the bulk of the population is youth, where the bulk of the population had on their own charted a course for their own development, that the best thing we could do was to support them, because there was no way we could redefine how they would do it, because they already charted a course for themselves. So and that's why we decided to develop a strategy for the creative industry. And developing that strategy for the creative industry, we designed it to be an enabler of what people are doing rather than to tell people what they should do. Because we knew, and when we debated and strategized about it, we said that if we wanted to make Nollywood to be like Hollywood, it would never succeed. Because people saw Hollywood before they started following Nollywood the way it is. If it is juju that people want to watch, so be it. Because because we are not the ones to tell people what to watch. We have to follow the market, not define how the market will behave. So everything we are doing is an enabler. So the creative strategy was done under a brand named CanX. And why we took that brand is because we are taking a long view of what we are going to do. We are not going to do it tentatively and stop. And that long view is one day where Afrexim Bank has built this ecosystem, and with the creative industry, we say it can go on its own. So we created the brand, we registered it everywhere, and we then said we could support it to grow by providing financing. Initially, we provided $500 million to support the creatives, and all across it, from film, music, fashion design, art and craft, culinary, and recently sport. We've doubled it now to $1 billion 2 weeks ago, because we've virtually used up the $500 million.
Fantastic.
So we had the financing and the guarantees, and there are quite a number of things we can talk about that. Of course, policy advocacy, and that advocacy essentially was to tell the governments to leave the people alone, and not what they were beginning to think, oh, we want to improve the quality. The market will determine how the quality will improve. It's not you that will determine it. We have digital, we have market access, we do linkages and partnerships, all these strategic pillars. And for each of them, for example, if you look at the movies, film, and sports, what we found was that there was nothing, no infrastructure to finance all of this. We didn't know how to finance movies. we didn't know how to finance film, but Kayode was pioneer in financing Nollywood in Nigeria. So what we tried to engage Exim India. We tried to engage the Hollywood industry to understand, and then we hire consultants to help us develop these instruments. I'm happy with them. We have the infrastructure that has enabled us now to start financing the activities in all of these. But financing alone also showed us that we had immense gaps in terms of intellectual property issues. We found that many of the people who were raising financing to produce movies, they were always cash strapped. So what that meant was that they would negotiate very, very unfavorable terms for themselves. So what we then did was we've just created an intellectual property company called the Kennex Creations Incorporated. So this Kennex Creations Incorporated is an intellectual property company we are combining with the venture capital fund we've just created so that we can provide venture capital to some of the creative industry, the producers and whoever they are, so that they can negotiate better the terms of engaging with producers or whoever is they want to engage in. And we have also then designed an arrangement whereby as cooperatives in fashion, in movies and all that, everybody will be part of this in terms of determining how to engage with that company that holds the intellectual property. Because some may want to sell that intellectual property to the company, which we then go and negotiate. Some may want to make it its agent, and some may want to engage in whatever way. But what we want is to have one consolidated African voice to be able to negotiate with those who we want to negotiate with. So we increase and improve what people, creative actors, and also those who are engaged in production, in directing, everything they're able to do. We're also doing training. The training we are doing also cuts across, but I would like to talk about music. Today, when music is produced in Africa, it's perhaps only the singer gets the credit. Maybe somebody else writes the music, they don't get anything. Even the writer of the music, when that music is used somewhere, it doesn't get paid royalty. So we went into an arrangement with Vincent Berry, the third, the 8th time Grammy Award nominee, to run music master classes. And we've used it to train 400 Africans, very young Africans, since COVID. And as they go through the masterclass, they produce music, and they produce, I think they produce about 3 or so. We're expecting to release early next year. They've engaged the big record labels and to be able to release this. What is unique here is that each music, you find out maybe produced by 100 people. Mm-hmm. There are some people who wrote the music, some people who wrote the tunes or whatever, but they're all recorded. And each person has a split and can benefit whatever the virtual negotiations on pricing and payment is, everybody gets it. And in the fashion industry also, we have taken over 50 fashion designers to Portugal Fashion Show to expose them to the markets there. And just recently, the Paris Fashion Week invited us, and we took, I think, 15 fashion designers from Africa to the Paris Fashion Show. And I just understand that one of them has just clinched a deal with the tour luxury. So he'll be launching in Dubai, Saudi Arabia, and I think, I don't know whether Qatar, from next year. But what that does is that it is exposing all those to the big fashion houses and also the big retailers so that they negotiate and buy. And then here in the US, We've worked with Armando Cabral to create an African fashion, luxury fashion store in the high street at Rockefeller Foundation. I invite everybody to go there. It has about 10 fashion brands there, plus Armando Cabral. What has happened was a concept we wanted to try with Armando Cabral, but it has become very successful. So we are looking to see how to expand it to other cities. I think we've been invited by Detroit, but we're also looking at Europe to be able to expand it so that African fashion can be exhibited in the high street, in a particular shop. People can go and have multiple designers exhibiting African goods. And we expect that that will also expand demand online. I think I would like to stop here.
Thank you, Professor. I know we'll have plenty of questions about how the creatives and producers that are in the audience can access Canex, but first I'd like to go to Mr. Kayode Patan of Bank of Industry. As Professor Orama mentioned, as we all know, Bank of Industry really pioneered financing in Africa for the creative industries. And so I wanted to, one, point out that in Nigeria, the creative industry is actually the second largest employing sector after agriculture. So I have a sense of why Bank of Industry was interested in this sector. But I just wanted to get a bit more of a sense of what your Bank of Industry is doing now and how you're supporting small and medium-sized enterprises now, and how Nigerians and others that might be interested in accessing and working with the Bank of Industry can do so.
Yeah, thank you very much. The Prof has touched on a lot of things. But looking at Nigeria, the creative industry, it's a very big industry. And the amounts of money we are talking about are large sums. There are reports that maybe Nollywood brought into the economy the last 1 or 2 years, about $18 billion US. It's a lot of money. Nollywood in Nigeria now, maybe every year we produce about 2,500 films. You know, in fact, they are so fast in Nollywood, they can get a film done in 1 week. You know, and now when you fly, you know, across the oceans, the Atlantic, you know, you have the option of watching Nigerian films, and you'll be surprised the type of people that actually watch Nigerian films. But when the bank, that's my bank, got started in 2014, in that sector, it was not as glamorous as what we are seeing today. Because we have all these creative writers, they want to produce a film. And you ask them, what do you have? I have my transcripts, I have my manuscripts, you know. That's my security. You know, most Nigerian banks are not used to lending people money based on intellectual capital that you have written, you know. So we have, as a bank, because we are DFI is a development finance institution, you know, we are supposed to de-risk some areas that the normal commercial banks will not want to get into. So the question is, how do we finance such people? So the bank came up with a scheme where we got some industry experts, people who are familiar with Nigeria. We know people like Joke Silva, you know, they've been there for years, you know, RMD and people like that. So we have a committee of experts. So when people come in, they actually read the manuscripts, you know, and they will tell us out of these 200 that we have read, these 10 are likely winners. So they have crossed the first barrier. The second thing is, how do you finance them? You don't want them to have the cash, because some of them are not going to use the cash for the purpose that they came to you. So we also got some people who are, you know, the people in the, who are going to do the filming, and the people who are going to produce the costumes. You disburse money to these people directly, and eventually the films are produced, and then hopefully, as a bank, you expect that when they begin to, those days, you know, most of these films are on CDs, you know, so they produce the films on CDs, you know, and then they sell them. But then another problem came up. The day the film is launched, that same day, counterfeiters, you know, already have their own copies. So as we release them, they are also selling their own. at maybe 1/20th of the price. So invariably the bank lost money because they will not be able to pay back. So we were forced to go to the next level, which means now begin to finance film houses, the screens, make it more glamorous. Because that way people have to go and watch them in the film houses, then they can pay back your money. So that way, most of the film houses in Lagos, the 6 major ones, we finance them. We finance about 150 screens in Nigeria, and that is increasing. And then COVID came. People couldn't even go to the theaters to go and watch the movies, And then you now have to go to the next level. How can we have these films on Netflix, where you can be in the comfort of your house and you can watch the films? Yeah. But then the quality of the films produced in Nigeria and most African countries are not that Netflix wants to produce. You have to actually make them ready for American audience, which means the quality has to be better, So it keeps on going on. But now we have gotten to a stage that people like AfriExim can say, we want to finance Nigerian films. There are projections that the music industry, for instance, we're talking about hip hop and all of that from Nigeria. Everywhere you go now, you can hear it. It took some time, But from projections, they're talking of streaming, music streaming in Nigeria in the next 3 to 5 years. You're talking about $500 million US. It might even be more. Because now when people like Burna Boy comes to the UK, some of the biggest venues are filled up. You talk of David O, and there are so many Nigerian, in fact, the World Cup, people that watch the World Cup, in one of the days, it was the Buga, the Nigerian music that was played, and the whole stadium was singing along. We're talking of a lot of money, So we put in a lot of money in that area. We finance the films, some of the popular films, I had some of them that people don't even know that the Bank of Industry was behind them. Half of it, Yellow Sun, Flower Girl, Phone Swap, Queen Amina, Oktoberfest, the CEO, the Three Wise Men. These were all films.
You guys can clap.
That we financed, But now it's a profitable sector, It's going to grow. It employs a lot of people, a lot of youth. So we want to encourage other people to get involved. But there are other areas too when you talk of the creative, like for instance, even the sports, you talk of big venues, the venues that are needed in Africa to host big events, there are very few of them, we're looking into sports arena and all of those things, the creative area, sports area. There's now a lot of promotion of NBA in Nigeria. When Nigeria, initially basketball was not popular, many years back, when Hakeem Olajuwon came to the US and the Hakeem the Dream, a lot of Nigerians, were interested. But now Nigerians are playing American football. There are a few Nigerians who are, so the area is big. We are happy we are pioneers. We lost money initially, but that's one of our jobs, Now we have de-risked the area. Some of them are very big. When you're talking of Ebony Life, Ebony Life recently, there was a Harvard study that was done on Ebony Life, We are happy financiers of Ebony Life, and they're more like that. They are going to training. Silverboard is going to training, so that we can have quality films from Africa that you can earn the money, because there's no point producing films like most of the films from Nollywood will not get onto Netflix. Right. They will not meet the quality cutoff. Right. That is the next level we need to get into so we can add more value into what we are doing. So that's some of the work we've done in the creative area.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Veronica, if I could just come to you to talk a little bit about how the Open Society Foundations is supporting the creative industries and particularly why. I was really struck by the mission around your work in terms of addressing systemic racism and really addressing representation. And so just to hear a little bit about what your focus is at OSF and how you're supporting the industry.
Thank you so much, Akuna. So for those of you who don't know the Open Society Foundations, we are a global philanthropy stretching across 5 continents, and we work in economic development by advancing democracy, social and racial justice, and me particularly, I work on the global initiative for the restitution of African cultural heritage. So what that means is I work with various stakeholders to repatriate objects that were violently taken from us taken from the continent during colonialism. So I work with the African Union, I work with museums in Europe and Africa, but primarily I work with artists and organizations that are centered in socially engaged art. So a lot of people don't know what it means to work in socially engaged arts, and it's really simple. I was in Amsterdam this past week and at the Prince Claus Awards, and I saw their motto that was like written everywhere was, "Culture is a basic need." And I was like, wow, that's really, really simple actually, because similar to air, water, shelter, we need culture to survive. It's critical to survival. I mean, none of us would be here without Black culture, right? So what I do is I work in industries and I collaborate with artists that center their work in promoting socially engaged art. And I do this by supporting creative industries such as art, film, media, tech, and I pump money into these organizations through grant making. We have fellowships that are 80 to 100K for individual artists, organizations that we fund from anywhere from 500,000 to $1 million, specifically that are centered in African-led and African-centered organizations. So that is what I do. And I'm really, really proud to be up here and say that I can do this work and lead this work alongside so many different people, because I am a sore thumb on this panel. Nobody ever thinks about how grant making, how philanthropy, how supporting art organizations, whether it's a film center in the middle of Senegal or a dance center out in Rwanda, how we can support creative industries through this. But I really think that Africa is the answer. Creative industries is the answer. Working with the youth, working to promote intergenerational, but also to create this new kind of Pan-African renaissance that speaks to the youth, is the way forward for Africa. So I'll stop there.
And thank you. And Veronica, you made a great point about the role that philanthropy has played, because I know that Open Society has supported films as well, yes. Including The Governor, which was a Nigerian film, and many others. And having now become a filmmaker and producer myself, I know how important it is to have philanthropies supporting, particularly when you're making art that is in the social impact space. Samba Batali, if I could just turn to you to ask about how your work as a philanthropist, and particularly given all of the advocacy that you have done in the area of creative industries. When I was preparing for this panel, I saw a few of the interviews that you gave in Kigali a few months ago, and you talked about the need to change the software of our mind when it comes to thinking about the creative industries. So I just wanted to highlight some of the work that you have been doing in the area, and particularly how the digital space is impacting the creative industries.
Thank you. First of all, let me thank Atlantic Council for setting up this stage for creative industry. This taking to me meeting Rama 1.5 years ago in Dakar.
Is your mic?
The mic?
Yes.
I said, first of all, let me thank Atlantic Council for setting up this stage for creative industry. I know Atlantic Council for several years. They was used to speak about, most of the time, politics. I think the thing is changing, and this take me to meet Rama 1.5 years ago when she was on vacation in Dakar, and I was about to go with like more than 200 people. I was flying them to Cape Verde, and asked her to join I was launching my first studio in Cape Verde. And then when we went there, she see all that we're doing, and she said, what can we do? I said, why don't we bring the topic of creative industry? And I'm ready to finance this, and so we can do a meeting about that. And then I think that was your first event that you did last year about creative industry, and then she told me that it was not that easy. People don't understand, even in Washington. So I would like to thank Atlantic Council and Rama for setting up this stage. And one thing about me, about creative industry, is that it's first passion. So I'm a music fan, and for those who know me, as soon as I start making money, back in 90s, I invested in music too. I think I was one of the first guys to bring American music to produce a big hip hop big hip hop artists into several African countries. I remember the first time I did a tour in 1996, I lost $150,000. That was a big money. I think I made my first million that year, and I spent $150,000 to bring artists. That was my first experience of concert. This is how I know that in a concert, you rarely make money in Africa because you don't have sponsors. Okay? And then I met Michael Jackson in 1997 in Tokyo. And then he went there to meet a billionaire who wanted to invest into Neverland. So we was introduced by a common friend. I was working on a project with a friend in Ghana with the son of this billionaire. And then when I met him, we talked about music. I was talking about his music. He was amazed how I know all the title, which years. And then he said to the guy, he wants me to come to Neverland. And then I came to Neverland, and we have a lot of discussion. And through that, I meet a lot of music people. I went to studio with Michael. I spent 4 days in Neverland. And then that took me to meet many other musicians, well-known musicians in Africa. So whenever I have time, I will fly them in. They can come for a concert. That was passion. And then 4 years ago, I decided to invest into creative industry, because from the study that I make, America, the creative industry is bigger than agriculture and transport. It's an industry of $760 billion. And one thing we lack in Africa is that business people were not investing in a creative industry. I see a lot of captain of industry, when they see me doing that, they laugh sometimes. They say, "What, Samba, why are you wasting your time?" Even my own team, I said last week at CANEX meeting in Abidjan, my own team, my accountant, when he see I was spending millions of dollars, he took me aside. He told me, "Samba, I want you to reply to me frankly. Are you putting money in this thing because you love music, or it's a business?" I say, it's both. It's passion, and it could be a business. And I give him an example. I say, whenever I have a passion for something, I first invest and learn, and then create my own world. I give him an example. When I start telecom in the years 99, I paid up a study trip with some telecom operator. We came to Silicon Valley. We visit Microsoft, Cisco, and all those people. And then from that trip, I learned, because those days, I remember when we visit Microsoft, they was talking about the future of mobile computing. Can you imagine those days when you see video on a phone? I remember that the guy who presented that, his name was Douglas Dedo, I never forget it. He said a few years from now, we could see video from the phone. And then I spent a couple of $100,000 before getting my first $12 million contract. Okay? When I came to solar, it was the same thing. I spent money visiting different industry in China. And then a couple of years ago, I get $19 million contract. Today, I make more than $600 million worth of contract into the solar industry. So music for me and creative industry is the same thing. I think for the past 4 years, I'm spending money, but I know for sure this will be something that will be worthwhile, because I'm seeing already that last week I brought 26 people to visit in Los Angeles, the Sidney Poitier new film school. I see one of the professors here, Travis. Thank you for coming. And we are now organizing a team of producers who visit also Fox Studio. I'm bringing them in Cape Verde in February in conjunction with some African producers to work to fine-tune the series that I'm launching for the whole continent, because we'll have actor and actress for every African country, actor from the US, from Europe, Asia, and Latin America. Why this? I want to do in one stone, touch couple of birds. First, business. Second, also, branding of Africa. Because we all know that if today everybody thinks that America is a paradise, it's due to Hollywood. That's clear. Mm-hmm. So I clearly understand that we'll not only make money economically just on the film, the money that we'll make, but also on the perception of changing the perception of the continent. I'm an investor in Africa. I know how difficult when you're talking with other investors trying to bring them into Africa, just because of the perception. Mm-hmm. So I think if we're starting to make good story about Africa, this perception will change. Yes. And then that will take us to the Africa we want. Because today, if you see most of our country, we think that investment is a big issue because of a risk factor. Because we think there is a risk. And I know personally, Africa is the place that you can make more money than any other country. And I see that with big corporations. I'm working with the biggest ID company. When I approached them 8 years ago and I bring them a model, they was talking about risk. And I say to them, no. I bring a model where I put money, they put money. This $20 million investment, the group is doing $4 billion, was the most return on investment on the entire investment they're making in the world. They are the one producing here the American IDs and all those things. But we put 20 million and we're making 200 million. So if you calculate the investment they made and the return on investment they're making, and then this show them that Africa is the place to invest. So we can set many other examples in Africa like this. Yes. So I think creative industry could be the same thing. And I would like to thank also Afreximbank, because they are very courageous, Afreximbank and ADB, to invest on those creative industry. Absolutely. Because if business people start investing without the bankers, at a certain point, it will be a problem.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Aldo, we know that you have been an entrepreneur in the media space and entertainment space for such a long time, and many people in this audience and that are watching probably have heard many of the artists, CK, M.I. Abaga, and others, but you've recently ventured into the infrastructure space with the studio and soundstage initiative, and so I wanted you to talk a bit about that. I believe Idris Elba mentioned earlier during the summit that there is a huge infrastructure gap. There's one screen for 800,000 Africans. So just talk a little bit about why you are focusing on sound stages and studios, and about why you are looking at Africa and the Caribbean.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. But I sit here wearing two hats. There's a music side and there's a film side. And let me talk really quickly about the music side. Because when I walked in on the backstage, I saw the ex-Im president, and I was introduced, and they said, oh, this guy that does music. And so she opened her phone and played Jerusalem. Who knows the song? And I was like, do you like this? And she started dancing. Now, it might seem like normal to you, but 17 years ago when we started Chocolate City, nobody cared about our music. I'm an attorney, and I remember then when I told people I was going to start a record label, they laughed at me because they're like, who's going to buy this music? There's piracy. Mr. Kayode was talking about bootlegging CDs. Do you know that in Nigeria in 2005, you could buy a blank CD for 150 naira and buy a D'banj album for 100 naira? Do you understand what that means? It's minus. That's how bad it was. So you can imagine that in 2008, we launched an album and we broke a record. It was 30,000 records sold that day. That's from Alaba. In 2019, we released a song called Love One Tintin. Who knows the song here? CK? It's 1.9 billion streams till date. That's the highest selling Afrobeat song ever. But that only happened because a few things came together. Financing, IT, the way we promote our culture through our film, our music, all adds up to this big pot. But there's also a perception issue, because if you look at how things are priced, unfortunately, 80% of the streaming records come from not unfortunately, it's great, but the US has 80% of the streaming data for African content. So there are no local platforms that distribute locally. So the only luck we have is that the pirates can't access free internet. Otherwise, they'll be pirating the music as well. So there needs to be local platforms built. But let me talk about the film studios. And I think someone mentioned it here. He said, film creates perception. The first time I went to New York was when I watched a TV show. I was 4 years old, never been there. Then I saw Times Square, and one day I'll go to Times Square, and maybe 10, 15 years later, I went to Times Square. But Times Square was such a disappointment. Really, it was just a bunch of lights. But they sold me their culture through film. What we fail to do is sell our culture through stories. And we have to change that perception, because without that, and so even with the soundstage, it's about what is the quality. President Obama talked about juju. Juju is not a bad thing. What is, what's this thing, Harry Potter? That's juju. That's the highest level of juju in the world, by the way. Facts. But it's so well told that you're so in there that you buy memorabilia and buy books and go around the world for them. So there's also film-induced tourism that comes from telling stories. I was watching something 2 days ago that, who's watched White Lotus here? Who knows the show, White Lotus? White Lotus has increased the sale for Santorini or somewhere in Italy by 30%. It's subscribed. So why do we want to tell the stories? We want to build sound stages because it helps to create jobs. It's an ecosystem. It's not just about the nice building. It's that we're going to upskill people. So the carpenter becomes the set designer, right? My fancy tailor here becomes a costume designer. The charge and bail lawyer, I don't even know what charge and bail is, but those are the lawyers that go to courts and hustle. They become entertainment attorneys. And they write contracts that change the world. And without the intellectual property, that's the foundation of the creative industries. So for us, we're not changing narrative by just building the stories. We're creating jobs. There'll be more film-induced tourism. This is going to change the perception and the reception of black people around the world. The final thing I want to say too is really around empowering females. We don't talk about that enough. Maybe I should have said that earlier, right? But it's key because 42% of the creative industries hire women. These are women between the ages of 30 and 45. And they're engaged in everything from fashion, film, you name it. Women run the world, right? And literally, they have more multitasking skills than we do. Let's be honest. We know that. So just talking about our role in Chocolate City, we have everyone from head legal, the head of music, just name it, it's female empowered. And it's not a quota system. It is by merit, it is by need, because women foster an ecosystem where men just try to get the check and pass it on somewhere else. The women are thinking about grooming and developing that. So for Pixelray, what our focus is creating and joining the narratives, because black people are disconnected. Somebody says, I mean, even in Nigeria, right here, the 3 Nigerians in this thing, we're from different countries, different states, different languages. Not to think about the black diaspora around the world. But with film and story and music, we can connect with one another, we can build wealth, and we can solidify the future for our young people. So that's the focus, and I hope that Afrexim Bank is here, Bank of Industry is here, and the Exim Bank president, actually the Exim Bank president actually offered a lot of assistance, said she would definitely support the project. So I plead with you for us to get that support as well, and thank you so much for the opportunity.
I just want to correct you that there are actually 4 Nigerians on the stage.
Oh, are you one of us? I'm just kidding.
But in all seriousness, I'm told that I have time for 2 questions before we wrap. So I see Rahama Wright, the CEO of Shea Yeleen, and also the chair of the President's Advisory Council on Doing Business in Africa. Rahama, please ask your question.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you all for your thoughts and your remarks. This was a really engaging conversation. And earlier we talked about the perception issue, and a couple of you all mentioned the perception issue. And my sister over here talked about how the creative industry is really about social justice. And one of the things we're not acknowledging is that part of the perception issue is due to white supremacy and racial inequality. Yes. And I think we need to bring space for that conversation in here. And it is not our job alone to address this issue because we did not create this issue. Let's just be real that the cradle of humanity is in Africa. We are the original creators. We have nothing to prove. And we need allies who are going to be real and authentic about how they've contributed to the negative perception of our communities and of our stories. And it's a cycle. I just want to briefly share yesterday, I was at the US Africa Business Forum, and I'm sitting next to one of the ministers from Zambia. And on my other side is a white man who does investments in Africa, and he's talking and very proudly about how he wants to do a $100 million investment in Zambia. And then he leans over to me and says, but you know the country is bankrupt. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, but you want to do an investment there. So clearly there's some opportunity. There's a contradiction here. And I think it's really important that we figure out a way to hold people accountable who are spreading stories and undermining us and, you know, creating a narrative that is not accurate or true. We're not the ones creating this narrative. So the question I have for all of you is, how do we hold space for our brilliance, our contributions, but also hold accountable the people that continue to try to undermine us and continue to try to make it seem that like Africans, Black people all around the world are not capable, nor have we not contributed so much to our global history and to our global economy. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, yes, Veronica.
Let's take one more too, because we're going to run out of time here. So let's just take 2, and we're over schedule.
Thank you. Great panel. Thank you for all being here, especially the 4 Nigerians. And my name is Sean Barlow. I'm the creator and founder of Afropop Worldwide on public radio for the last 35 years on afropop.org. And my question to you guys is, there's more to Africa than Nigeria. There's more to African music than Afrobeats. What about Congolese rumba? What about Dar es Salaam? What about Dar and Nairobi? Egypt is the center of Arab pop music. South Africa is the center of Amapiano. Of course, Bamako, Dakar. So why is it all Nigeria all the time?
Wow.
Hi, good morning. My name is Moreira Shongesa from Mozambique, and I think I'm going to answer to you that as well. Coming from Mozambique, I had 20 questions for you, but you already answered them because I think the Nigerians have attitude. What you spoke to me about here from the Bank of Industry, you spoke about solutions across the whole value chain for the film industry. So I came here just to say to you that as a Mozambican, I would like to be part of this dream because we might be very far in Southern Africa. We may be speaking in Portuguese, but listen, we have amazing locations and amazing content. And your pain is my pain. I'm the owner of the Maputo International Jazz Festival, and I lost money for 6 years. Then COVID came. So what I wanted to say, I'm not going to ask you a question, but I'm going to ask you to give a big hand for this gentleman for encouraging us. Thank you.
Well, let's start with Veronica answering the first question, and then we can go. Professor Rama, do you want to take an attempt to?
No, thank you very much. Well, I think they touched on something I also wanted to talk about. The reason we wear jeans today, the Levi jeans first came through the movies to the rest of the world. What is happening today is we are beginning to see globally people carry bags designed with African fabric, clothes, African colors and all that. I think we should take control of our narrative. I think he said it. I don't think we should mind about the person, that kind of guy who whispered to you. In fact, you should be sorry for him because he knows he's bankrupt and he was there begging a minister to go and invest. So there's something wrong with him. So,
Facts.
Or maybe he wants to be able to invest cheaply by convincing everybody that the country is broke.
Well, maybe he didn't want her to think that he was begging.
Yeah.
Begging the minister. Because the issue is this, I think we have to take control of our story, of our narrative, and it is the creative industry and the power of digital technology that is making us do this. I tell a quick story. When I was a young officer in Nigeria Sporting Port Bank, out of school, I was made responsible for what we call the Kenya Initiative. The Kenya Initiative for that time was to how we could export Nigerian fabric, Nigerian dresses to East Africa. Because we went there and saw that East Africans were still wearing suits. Everything they did, they wore suits. They were not wearing African dresses. So we saw an opportunity there. So I was going to Kenya 3 times a year. The trade missions, and we opened shops for Nigerians. And things started changing. Of course, you can see they wear it now everywhere. But what accelerated it was now the Nollywood. With Nollywood, it accelerated. Even I think Nexim dropped that program after we left. But Nollywood changed it. And today, you go to Zimbabwe, I'm just talking about Africa now, people speak in Pidgin English. Nobody went there to tell them to speak Pidgin English. In Bahamas, I was on vacation with my family, and people approached me, asking me questions about my country, some of the things since I left Nigeria a long time ago, I wasn't aware of. So I think the movie industry provides the opportunity for us to change the narrative. We just need to tell the story the way we want it told, so that others will see us from that perspective rather than the warped mind that comes into the way they think about us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Did you want to comment?
I would like to speak about what the gentleman said, if it's just Nigeria. And so I think one of the reasons Nigeria is all around is first because it's the biggest population. And I think also creative industry, you can notice anytime there's an economic development in a country, creative tech step. I tell this story. Last year, there's a mythical group called Wenge Musica. It's a group in Congo. So I've been knowing them since '96. They came to me as sponsor, $10,000. They was doing a concert in Guinea, 1996. And then one of my friends who was with me saw one of them in the hotel. He said, "Oh, this is your guy." He called him. And he said, "One thing I'm dreaming. These people, they break since 25 years. Everybody tried to bring them back together. Beer company put $2 million. President Kabila tried. Many people tried, they cannot bring them together. And I think you can help me to achieve that." So I take one of them aside, we talk. I said, "I'm going to tell you one thing. How old are you?" He says he's 54. I say, "I think 6 years from now, you will be out. And even these 6 years, I'm giving you too much time. I think you have something to do for history. This country needs cohesion, and you can set up. From what I understand, you are the national team, because on your group, there's every tribe from Congo. You can make history when you come back together. This is more than money." And I said, because music, it's time. When Mobutu was strong, Congolese music was at this state, because the economy was strong. After Makossa came in, Cameroon, after Coupé Décalé, Côte d'Ivoire, and then Nigeria. So understand, if you are not together, your music gonna lose. So he said, "Samba, I have no problem, but the problem is the other guys." Because the good thing, I was coming from a point, these are guys, since I know them in 1996, anytime they see me, I will give them something. We met in Paris, I meet them. In any places, I will give them hand, or when they come in a country, I give them a car. In country, I do business, I put them in a hotel. And they want to put my name in the song, I say, "No, I don't want you to put my name in any song." So they owe me favor. I never ask them something in return. But I say for the history, you need to do that. So then I fly the two guys, that's J.B. Piana and Werason. I fly them in Paris, because most of them was abroad, Belgium, Paris. So I bring all of them, so they agree. When the image was posted, nobody believed. He said, "No, it's not true." Even one of the guys said to the president said, "No, this is it. They will just take money, they will not do anything." But to make this story short, at the end of the day, we succeeded. I spent almost 800,000 in this reunion. And now I'm going to produce them in Cape Verde. So to tell you, so their reunion album will be produced in Cape Verde. And since I started this Cape Verde music studio, I did the first studio 1.5 years ago. This year I did the second studio. And now I'm investing in a film studio with some partnership, because I believe in collaboration with people that did things before you. And I did, the past 2 years, 4 music camps, musicians from all over the world. I brought in Teddy Riley. Teddy Riley, who's managing my, Teddy Riley was the one who produced Guy, Bobby Brown, Holding. So collaboration. Davido, Techno, you can name them.
Somebody need some of my artists as well.
Huh?
I need some artists as well.
Which one?
CK.
CK, okay.
Young John.
Yeah, so I fly all those people around. And because I believe in the fact that it should be an African movement. not just Nigeria. It's an African movement.
Absolutely. Samba, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. I know we are out of time, but I wanted to give an opportunity for one of our sponsors to say a word. Access is a company based in Dallas. It's the leading home healthcare technology company. Their work enables organizations to provide healthcare in the place people provide to be treated most, at home. Access has also had the distinction of quietly promoting African arts and culture in the United States for over a decade. They are the lead sponsor for over 12 years of the biggest African music awards in the diaspora, Afrima. They have brought major artists such as Davido, Burna Boy, Fally Ipupa, and many other acts from other African countries to the US. They're active in supporting film, fashion, fine arts, and most recently supported the work of African designers at the Dallas International Fashion Show. John Olajide, the CEO of Access, could not be here, but I am thrilled to invite Access's Senior Vice President of External Affairs, Stacey Adams, to say a few words.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your patience, and thank you so much, Akuna, for allowing me to just to have a moment. This has been so inspiring. You know, Akuna knows my heart and background is in the arts, so getting to come full circle and be here and listen to all the energy that's on this stage is just so exciting. I am so thrilled to see the potential that's before us. And I want to start by thanking the Atlantic Council for hosting this important discussion, how we can further unleash the full potential of the creative talent across Africa. Access is so proud to be a sponsor of this event. For those of you that are not familiar with Access, Access is based in Dallas, Texas. We're the leading home healthcare technology company. We enable organizations to provide healthcare in the place people prefer to be treated, right at home. Our mission is to make lives better by providing access to healthcare around the world. Beyond that, under the leadership of our Nigerian-born CEO, John Olajide, another Nigerian, we are investing in Africa heavily. We're already creating jobs through technology, agribusiness, and tourism, as well as hospitality. With Africa having 40% of its population under the age of 15, we have the opportunity to unleash a whole generation of creative talent to benefit the continent and the entire world. On behalf of Access and our founder and CEO, John Olajide, I want to conclude by saying we are honored to play a small role in helping make today's dialogue possible. I believe when we are working together, anything is possible. This is particularly true when we provide creative talent the resources that they need to flourish. Thank you very much for allowing us to be a part of today.
And thank you, Stacey and Access, for your kind support. I just want to thank all of you for coming and our amazing panel here. I heard nonstop clapping and energy, which is great. So on behalf of the Africa Center at the Atlantic Council, continue to look for our leadership in the space of creative industries. We have an entire program, an entire work stream, not only putting on events like this because you are all here today, but we have a large virtual audience as well, but also producing policy recommendations and financing programs and projects to make this a reality beyond events. So thank you today and look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.